maybe. All right, let's see if that worked. I think maybe it did. Oh, there we go. Yay! Figured it out, Coach Kevin. There we go. I don't know why, but now YouTube requires like an extra step that I didn't notice before. Then another box I have to click on. Kevin, you need to start writing these songs down and naming them.
I call that one? No, I can't say that one's title.
That was frustrating.
When you go about your day-to-day life,
Yeah.
what's it like in your head?
What do you mean?
Like, is there like a little voice that talks to you? Is there,
A voice?
like, do you think in
Only my
words?
own voice.
Do you think in words, or do you think in like pictures, or do you think in
Depends on what I'm thinking about.
like in general? You're just like teetering about. You're puttering.
Sometimes I'll admit, I'm not ashamed. I talk to myself out loud. I don't even,
Mm-hmm.
you have an internal dialogue, right? I think.
I don't.
You don't have an internal dialogue?
Not usually.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't
It's
understand.
50-50 for me.
It's 50-50 what?
Yeah. Like it goes either like I'm thinking about stuff and like talking it out in my head, or it's like music.
You have music going on in your head?
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know what? I do have music in my head a lot of times. What was I? Oh, you know what I had in my head the other day? Actually, a couple things.
Was it the Eagles?
No, it was, what's his name? Norman Greenbaum or something? You ever hear the song Spirit in the Sky?
Yeah.
That is an amazing song.
What vibe is that?
Hmm?
Oh, that's Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy.
Well, I mean, it's much older than that.
Yeah.
The funny thing is about him is I actually looked him up. He's old. I mean, that is an old song from back in like the 60s. He's like a totally weird dude and like a total hippie, right? Like,
Wouldn't have guessed.
but that song, when you listen to that like the guitar in that, it's like gritty. It's like grimy. Nirvana would have been proud of having that.
Mm-hmm.
And that riff, it's just like, it's dirty. That's like a heavy metal,
What is it,
Black
dirty?
Sabbath.
I don't know what dirty means in the context of music.
It's like gritty and grimy and in the context of the time. I'm not sure who came out first, whether like Helter Skelter from the Beatles came out before or after that, but it was a sound that I don't think had really existed before he did it. And the rest of his album is nothing like that.
Interesting.
The rest of the album is like very crunchy.
Crunchy.
Like with flutes and like violins.
Flutes are crunchy?
No, I'm saying crunchy like granola crunchy, right? Like very. Like I wanted to listen to that album because I was like, what else is on this album? I want to hear what's else. Like, where did this song come from? Like, what else was this guy doing? And I think that was the only song on the album that I thought was in any way listenable. Listenable? I don't know what the right word is. Worth listening to.
Yeah.
But it's such a great song. But anyway, like I'll have songs like that,
Mm-hmm.
or worse, right? I might have Blackpink running around in my head because my girls like to listen to it more, whatever it is,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the other. There was a song. Was it a Britney Spears song? There was some song that was rattling around my
Toxic.
head.
I would.
But then they do like a little
That's
distortion, right?
Yeah, that's toxic. I used to have the Britney Spears song "Lucky" stuck in my head
Oh,
for
I don't know that one.
for like 3 years. It wasn't even
That's
a good
awful.
song. Yeah,
That's awful.
I was in 5th grade.
What was the song? There was a song that I had going on in my head yesterday that it was so ridiculous. But yeah, I'll get those, like, I call them earworms.
Yeah. listen to Christian heavy metal, and
There's a great song that I heard the other day. Because I was in the 70s channel. I have 70s on 7. And, you know, I was a kid in the 70s, so I don't remember all of these, but this one I didn't remember. There was a, do you remember who the Osmonds were? Do you remember Donny Osmond?
Yeah, he did the Mulan soundtrack.
Did he really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So, Donny Osmond was like, they were like the white Mormon Jackson 5, essentially, is what they were. They did this song, I had never heard the, well, at least I don't remember ever hearing the song. I think it was called Crazy Horse. And it was like a Christian heavy metal, but like they were all in, but super corny at the same time. You know, like you're like, whoa, these guys can actually sing. This is totally corny, but they can sing.
Yeah.
Like they were a talented bunch.
I don't know about Marie Osmond, is it Marie?
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I used to watch the Donnie and Marie show.
Yeah.
Right, that was a thing. That you watch the Donnie and Marie show. I mean, you
No,
were
I
even born.
know of it.
But like Marie was like, I'm not sure she was even part of the Osmonds. Was she? Wasn't she so young? I can't remember.
It was like the two Osmonds.
No, there was like a whole thing. There was the Osmond family. They were like, I mean, they're Mormon, so there's probably like 25 of them. It was like they were the original Mormon tabernacle. What's a tabernacle? Does anybody know what a tabernacle is? What's a tabernacle?
The tabernacle is the
Is that the altar?
No, yeah, it's like the Jewish altar that they would construct. Like it's like semi non-permanent, I think. I don't know. They're very specific constructions. I thought tabernacles were Jewish.
Are you Jewish?
No.
I just don't
I
think
could
on
be wrong.
swine.
I might be wrong.
What?
But
You might be Jewish, or you
no,
might be
no, I might be wrong about what I think a tabernacle is, because I looked it up recently.
That's a pretty cool name, tabernacle.
It's pretty cool. I was like, I don't know what this is, and I looked it up, and I still don't know, maybe. But
I mean,
I think it's like the construction of a site of Jewish praise, and it's like only like very
This is
specific
very
people.
specific. I can't believe you with these kinds of details. I mean, that sounds pretty credible to me. I don't think you're BSing.
Luckily, if anyone's actually watching us, they're also probably on the internet, and
The interwebs.
Yeah, I don't feel too bad about saying wrong things because you can literally.
Because it can be corrected. You're not claiming to actually know.
No, just
you're giving your best guess.
Everything that I say is either a metaphor or like my best attempt at just communicating. So just Google everything.
That's what I do.
Do you listen to music when you roll?
When I roll.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Jiu-jitsu.
Do I make it up in my own head, or do
No,
I like to have sound?
Do you like listen to
music?
I know I've been to some places where they don't let people listen to music during like comp training, and I thought that was interesting.
Is that because you won't have any such music when you're actually competing? They want to make it as real. They should also have like a terrible ref there, just like totally making the worst calls. That actually, if you want to make it realistic, that would be my thing, where you just like.
Where you're allowed to cheat while you train, and like if you can get away with it.
No, today. Kevin will be playing the role of the Brazilian that you'll be facing inevitably, and I'm going to be the ref that always gives him mystery points.
I can do semi-illegal things, and they'll.
I won't even be looking. I'll be looking at some girl in the stands, or like checking my watch or something for like some specks of dirt while you do whatever dirty, Brazilian, thing that you're doing.
Heel hooks.
Yeah, he's totally like cranking on the heel.
I don't know.
I actually saw a match once. Remember this match? This was a match with Keenan Cornelius against, what was his name? He's a big guy. But they actually stopped the match and did a video review that took like 10 minutes and wound up disqualifying Keenan because he like.
Oh yeah.
But I'm like, there is no video review. I've never heard a video review in jiu-jitsu ever. Have you ever seen a video review in jiu-jitsu, like for a ref's review?
Usually they just make a decision and they don't.
That's it, and it's bad, but they don't ever revisit it.
Maybe they were tired of Gavao storming the mat. Because you remember when that happened, he was kicked out of Worlds that year? Or his pants or something? I forget.
Who did he storm the mat about? I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, one of his guys had a bad call, and he was like.
That used to be every tournament. Every tournament, somebody would in the end, somebody would storm them. Like that was the thing.
Yeah.
Like if that didn't happen, it was a late tournament. Like nobody good was there.
Well, they banned Andre that year, and I think it kind of stopped happening. Because if you're willing to ban Andre,
you got to draw the line.
Yeah.
You got to draw the line somewhere, and that's a good line to draw.
I still think it was the right thing for him to do. Andre to storm the mat.
I mean, if it wasn't against the rules, and he
Well, it
didn't.
was against the rules, but it's, I don't know, it's nice to have a person who's willing to storm a mat for you.
I mean, did they change the decision? I mean, were they
I don't
like,
think so.
Andre, you're disqualified, but yes, you had a good point.
I don't think so, but like, people remember it, and you know.
In my experience, a ref will never change a call.
Yeah, on principle.
I mean, just like if you ask them nicely, they might, no, let me finish.
Okay.
They might entertain the idea that you had a point, right? Like they might say like, you know, like, but they're never going to change it. Like,
No, because
I've asked people like, why, how come you didn't, you know, score this? And I try to be as respectful as possible. Like, hey, I'm not arguing the point. I just want to know for future reference, how come I didn't get how did I didn't get that advantage? Or why did that person get the advantage? And they're like, well, you didn't really have it. I'm like, yeah, the guy defended and turned away. Yeah, but you lost.
I don't really like triangles.
I don't like Americans.
I don't think they're real. You know. It could be
You didn't really try to pass the
like,
guard.
It could be any reason.
It
right?
could be any reason.
That's why it doesn't have to be like you should submit every time. If you can't get the submission, you should get a 6-point lead. If you can't get the 6-point lead,
You could have gone either way.
yeah, I mean it's a tie.
I mean, I always just thought like,
Do your best.
look, if you win by an advantage,
That's a tie.
or you lose by an advantage,
If you win by points, that's a tie.
I mean, you can rack up enough points where it's not really in much of a
No.
question.
No. If the point of jiu-jitsu is to submit the
No,
other
no, no.
person.
I'm not arguing the point of like the larger philosophy of jiu-jitsu. I'm talking about
Tournament
like
style.
you're in a tournament, in the match, and you just either eke out a win with an advantage, or the other person on a penalty, you know, whatever it was, a negative advantage. Like, I mean, you can't complain.
Ooh, I have a question. All right, if you had to choose between, if you rolled with someone who was good,
Yeah.
like your level, would you rather?
Well, those are two different things.
Would you rather submit the person with a 0-0 point thing, or would you rather have 50 points to 0, no submission?
Who is it? Is it
You're
somebody I
the
know?
winner. No, it's just someone who you respect, whoever. Like, it's a good match.
If I respect them, then I definitely want to submit them. If I don't like them and don't respect them, then I want to rack up 50 points.
But the submission is better, right?
I mean, if you rack up 50 points on somebody, I mean, just by sheer.
No, if you rack up 50
Fatigue,
points,
you should be able to submit them.
you should be able to submit them. You should be able to.
50 points.
No, if you get 50 points, you should be able to submit them. If you can't, something's wrong.
I'm
You-
trying
like,
to think
no,
of an
if-
example of where somebody
That's the thing. If there's a
didn't
you have the choice-
submit them at the end of the 50
if you have
points.
the choice between getting those last 10 points and like submitting a person, you should be able to submit the
Yes,
person.
I agree. What do you think of the idea in wrestling to have this, where you have like the tech fall,
Yeah.
where if you score, I think it's 10 points in a period, or I mean, it varies from the high school to.
I mean, why do they have that? Is it to get through all the matches faster?
I think it rewards somebody who.
I think it's so.
I think it's a reward for aggression. Because pinning somebody is hard. That is not easy to do.
Yeah.
But if you rack up, and 10 points on somebody isn't easy to do either, but
Is
if you racked up 10 points on somebody in a period,
Yeah, that's good.
you're probably going to pin them eventually. So why don't we just cut
No,
the
I know
chase?
why they do it. Because teams do cumulative points.
Oh, yeah, that's.
So if you have like one really bad kid, you don't want him the reason that your whole team loses, as that guy gets like 1 billion points on.
Oh, is that what it
I
is?
think so.
Oh. Well,
If
that's
jiu-
interesting.
if jiu-jitsu were
But
more
they allow
team-
that. But they allow that in the Olympics and international level for the World Championships.
Really? Falls?
They have to have
Well,
falls.
do they give out medals based by teams or by individuals?
Individuals.
That makes sense.
So.
I don't know. That doesn't.
I mean, it's just like one of those things where it's like, it's a tech fault, right? Like, letting somebody rack up 10 points on you, that's
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on your scoring, but that's like,
But, like,
5 takedowns.
But that other person, like, I don't know, there's something about that little chance that they could maybe pin the person.
Maybe, and
Maybe.
that can happen.
It can happen.
But they're like, not this year.
Yeah.
I like that idea though. I like that idea, especially if you were going to do your version of no points. I think it's another variation of that where you can just run
Only
up.
points.
And push-out points too. I like the push-out points.
What's push-out point?
I mean, in wrestling, if you push somebody out of bounds, you get a point.
Yeah.
So that way the person can't just like keep going out of bounds, which is a problem in jiu-jitsu.
But yeah.
Stay in the mat. I like that idea. It's not a terrible idea, especially because you can just sit down. You can just sit down.
Isn't there generally more room in wrestling? Though?
Yeah,
So, like,
it depends, because in the finals of the IBJJF, the mat is huge.
Yeah, but like.
But the regular matches can be very small.
People just be pushing each other out.
Well,
like,
here's the thing. I personally don't want to watch, like, Gordon calls it like JV wrestling, you know? I don't want to watch. It's not even JV wrestling, all right? Like, I've watched enough JV wrestling that it is fun to watch. Like, the kids do get after it. I don't enjoy watching two guys who are not good at wrestling, who are supposedly really good at submission and, you know, playing guard and passing guard. I don't really appreciate watching those two guys push each other around for 8 or 9. Like, that's like almost every heavyweight fight to win match now is two dudes just pushing each other around the ring.
I was trying to knock him off the stage. That's a legitimate strategy.
But you don't get points for that.
Yeah, but you get some. Actually, like, they don't do points in fight to win, so you
They
might get
kind of do.
No, it's like whoever is the most dominant. So pushing someone off the ring, that's going to be the most dominant thing.
Or
you can
getting
do.
DQ'd. I think that you should do the Spartan kick like Wagner Hocha did against what's his face, where he kicked him off the edge in the back. That was the best.
Yeah, that's pretty dope.
He did get DQ'd. I think he won that match and then he got DQ'd, like DQ'd later or something. Yeah, they let the match keep going.
Huh. Weird.
Yeah. Wagner Hocha is a nasty piece of work. I like him a lot.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, although the last couple matches he just kind of pushes. He's a pusher. He's just a pusher. That's boring. Oh, did you hear about the new Who's Number One lineup?
Who's number one?
It's it's DDS versus Atos again. That's like the only rivalry that matters anymore.
Yeah.
And they said they're even.
Really?
Well, because this year the Rotolo twins basically just wrecked everybody. Yeah. And they beat, I think, they beat Mickey and they beat Ethan and they beat Oliver Taza. I'm not sure if any of the top guys on either side have really competed against each other. But it's going to be Craig Jones versus, what's his name? Ronaldo. The human highlight reel, they call him. Which is, they took that away from Dominique Wilkins. Do you know who Dominique Wilkins is? Dominique Wilkins was the guy. He was like, before Michael, he was in the league at the same time roughly as Michael Jordan. But he was like, they called him the human highlight reel because he just dunked the ball. Like, he played for the Hawks. Basketball reference. Okay. He was not as skilled as Michael Jordan, but like when Michael Jordan came in the league, everyone was like, oh my God, that's how you dunk the basketball. But before...
Did they give that nickname to Michael, or did they just stop calling that guy that thing?
No, Michael had his own nickname. It was Air.
Air?
Air Jordan.
I thought that was the name of the shoe.
I mean, that's because it was named after him.
Oh.
And which was nice because it had the Nike Air, like, technology in it. I don't know if you remember Nike
I remember
Air. That was
they
a thing.
were putting bubbles in the bottoms.
That's what the Nike Air was.
Interesting.
And Reebok had its pump. Do you remember the Reebok pump?
I remember the pump.
But yeah, Ronaldo versus Craig Jones, and I think in a no-gi match, Craig Jones is going to be very short work of him. In a gi, I think Craig Jones would still win, but it would be more interesting.
Is Craig officially DDS now?
Oh yeah.
Since when?
He competed at Abu Dhabi under DDS.
Oh.
He's been training with them. I don't know if he's in Puerto Rico with them right now. I thought he was.
I've seen little clips of his instructional coming out. It looks really good.
Which one?
I don't know, like leg lock stuff.
He's had a bunch over the years. Is this another one?
Yeah, the newest one. Just like watching him move. It's nice seeing where he's comfortable.
Good. He's pretty good, that guy.
Yeah.
He's pretty good.
It's weird.
Nicky Ryan is going to go up against. Who is it from Altos? It's not a Rotolo twin. Who's that? Oh, it's, I don't think it's Altos. It's Roberto Jimenez, who's been on the tear. pretty cool. Nicky hasn't been out for a while. I think he's had kind of subpar outings.
Wow.
You know? I mean, he hasn't won, you know, to put it that way.
Yeah. He just needs to get his adult body.
And apparently Eddie Cummings has just dropped out of jiu-jitsu altogether.
Yeah, that's been
I didn't know that.
forever.
I mean, I knew he wasn't around, but I think he doesn't even train anymore.
Huh.
I don't know if that's true or not, but
What does he do?
I mean, he's like a really smart guy. He's like a PhD in something. He's kind of like John, which is probably why they didn't get along, from what I've heard. Or at least, you know, I mean, I'm sure they didn't hate each other, but
Bitter intellectual rivalries.
I guess, I don't know, differences of opinion. But, you know, Eddie, I mean, he would just, either he would tap you out in like 30 seconds, or you'd have this drawn out battle with him. I can't remember the last time he actually, like, lost. You know?
I don't remember who
He got beat by Taquinho a couple times, but very close, you know, very like advantages or, you know, negative point or something. And you know who else hasn't been around? I guess probably because he's stuck in Australia is Lachlan Giles. He has not been active at all this year,
Yeah.
I think.
That's what I was thinking of. I get Craig Jones and Lachlan Giles mixed up.
They're both Australian. They're both white
They're the
dudes.
same person.
They're essentially the same person.
They do leg locks, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Australian. I don't know. I know they're different. I just don't know how.
I think Lachlan is more, I think it was Craig's coach at one point.
Oh. I like Lachlan.
Yeah, he's really good.
I know I'm supposed to.
What's that?
I know I'm supposed to.
What do you mean?
Because of the ADCC. He did the small people jiu-jitsu against the big people. He got the third place.
He did. That was his claim to fame.
Real jiu-jitsu.
I mean, he is an example of someone who maybe doesn't get to the top of the podium, but does so well, you know, even getting third place, that, you know, he has carved out a place for himself. You know, he's not a 5-time world champion,
Yeah.
right? He probably has won some regional tournaments or something, you know. I think, single-handedly beat everyone at a quintet one year. But,
Was that him?
yeah, I think it was him.
Nice.
And then he put out his DVD, you know, and then,
Yeah, the Craig Jones DVD looked like a lot of very similar techniques to what we're doing.
I think they're all essentially, you know, Craig was very good at what he did. You know, he did a lot of stuff from the knee shield, and that was like something that he had done, and he brought with him to, you know, Penzo's. And then I think John was like, okay, let's iron out all the wrinkles.
Yeah.
And that's when he started really, I mean, he was obviously very good when he got there.
I thought
But
Gordon and Edward and family were already pretty knowledgeable at all those positions before he came
so
over.
I think that's what I'm saying. That's when he came, and then John ironed it all out, right? Like he was like,
for him or
for
for
him.
everybody?
For him.
Okay.
You know,
Makes sense.
because Gordon, I mean, has talked about it and been like, you know, he was okay when he got here,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but now he's really good because he trains with us, you know, like that's the
Not at all marketing.
no. But I think when you see him now, well, first of all, he has a lot more confidence and composure because he's been around the block a couple times and he's won a lot of big matches against really good people. But I think he's a lot. I mean, I think he's improved for sure. What's interesting about Lachlan's instructionals is that he structures them very differently than anybody else.
Does he go back to front?
Hmm?
Like start at the finish?
No, because that's what
50-50.
that's Ryan Hall does that,
Yeah.
and John to a certain extent does that.
Yeah.
It's a very similar idea. It's not like, Like usually he'll start off in the dominant, whatever position he wants to be in. Talks about, you know, finishing and then, you know, or maintaining the position, you know. So it's not linear from top down. It's usually kind of bottom back, right? But the way that Lachlan will do it is that he has like a primary, kind of like this is the idea, right? This is what you want to do, and then from there it's a you know, what are the common ways that somebody's going to prevent or counter you? Like what are the mistakes that you're going to, right, or that the other person is going to, you know, use against you or whatever. And then he kind of addresses each one of those, but the DVD is, or his instructions are essentially built around this idea of you're going to go in, you're going to drill this thing, and then people are going to mess you up, and then you're going to come back and you're going to like look at how you messed up, and then you're going to watch that, and then you're going to go back and you're going to drill that, and then there's this back and forth. It's not like watch it once and you'll know everything.
Yeah.
And then he gives you like outlines. You can he'll give you like a downloaded,
Oh, that's cool.
you know, PDF of like his outline, and he'll be like, okay, here's like the core, you know, and then here are the things you do off the core, and then here are the things that you have to, you know, you're going to run into, and you can come back and watch. And he says like, hey, email me or whatever if you get stuck. So I thought it was, and it's very exhaustive. I should do a video on comparing the leg lock instructions, the major leg lock instructions.
Oh,
What's the matter?
I'm tired.
You're tired. Why are you tired?
I'm not tired. You're tired.
I'm not tired. I'm in pain. I'm going to schedule my hip injection for this week, I think.
Is that what you crazy kids are calling it these days?
No, it really is a hip injection.
Cortisol?
Yeah.
Cortisol.
I don't know what they call it, but I just want it to be sweet, sweet pain relief.
Have you read any more of that OP book?
No, I haven't started at all. In fact, I'm still in the middle of my Vietnam aggression. You put me on or sidetrack. So, which I find fascinating. I'm actually learning a lot.
When you're done with Vietnam, can you research the Contra Wars for me?
No. I actually want to go back, and my new thing is that I have to set to the side so I can do the other 3 things I was supposed to do before I got into this thing, is the actual predicate for the Revolutionary War.
Oh.
Because, you know, we had this idea of like, they taxed us too much and we didn't like it, and so we revolted. I'm pretty sure that's not.
Oh, what's the reason?
I don't know. I mean, I just don't think, like, I'm in the mode now that I question like all the kind of simple one-line answers for anything.
I sent you the thing about impressment, right?
Yes. Well, we talked about that.
Yeah.
The press gangs.
Yeah.
I love that concept. We should totally bring that back.
I don't have a boat though.
But it should be good for anything, right? Like, oh, you're in jail. Like, we need somebody to go fight fires off in the woods. Let's go.
No, it only works on a boat because if you take someone out to the woods to fight fires, they just stop fighting fires and walk away.
No.
If you're on a boat, you know, the implication is that you're gonna throw them overboard if they don't work.
Look, there's some of these places where they go in the kind of remote parts of California,
Sure.
You're not walking out of there.
Yeah.
Unless you are like
You
a
could.
real good, like, backwoods outdoorsman, you
Yeah.
know, like Davy Crockett.
But if that happens, you have to do a lot of paperwork, you know, you gotta like.
I think they
do all
have
this stuff.
armed guards, because they do have inmates.
It's expensive. You know what's cheaper than an armed guard? The ocean. It's free. It's all around you, right? And you're just like, we're gonna go.
Oh, do you have an objection to your new terms of employment, Kevin? Well, the shore is, I think, well, any shore is some way that, anyway, just pick a side.
You have a choice.
The sea is your, wait, the sea is your oyster? No, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think.
Whatever. Something is your,
Everything is your oyster.
everything is your oyster.
Yeah.
The sea is, but that doesn't kind of mix metaphor. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. You could look. I mean, if you just said to me like, Rich, would you rather fight fires or like wander until you die of thirst, or get eaten by like a bear or something?
How big are the fires?
The fires are deadly too. The fires are deadly too.
I don't know. Can you imagine though,
Getting-
starting a revolution because you were taking, like some country was like sending ships over to your land and stealing your people?
No, what would
bringing
happen? No,
them
so
over?
the ships were. It wasn't like the Vikings. Like the English would come here,
Yeah,
and they. I mean, for the trade,
yeah,
right? I mean, they would. They had a reason to be here.
yeah, and then
But meanwhile, if you just happen to be like available, you
Yeah.
know, i.e., in jail or unconscious or susceptible to persuasion of the physical kind, you might wind up on a ship. Which actually, you know, I don't think it's so bad.
it depends on your perspective. If you're the sheriff of the town, it's probably a great idea. You know, like why?
It's very simple. If you don't want to get pressed into service,
do
don't be a
yeah.
town drunk or don't try to steal something. Or
But that's fun until like you know you just start arresting.
they
people
probably
and, like,
picked up the wrong person. You know, it's probably what happened. They picked up like George Washington's cousin or something. He got really mad. You know.
Yeah.
Because you know, cousin Louis was misbehaving and doesn't deserve to get pressed into the British Navy.
Silly. Yeah, something like yeah.
But you know what? Like I think, and plus the different colonies had different. They were independent, right? It wasn't like the people in Boston were doing, you know, the same as the people in Virginia, or the, you know, and it wasn't like they could Reddit with each other or whatever it is, you know, and be like, hey, what do you guys think? It was like a 2-month journey from
Yeah.
Boston to, you know, Roanoke or wherever, you know,
Seems like such a reasonable pace to live. Like
horseback.
you know, like having to wait 2 months to hear back from someone. That's enough time to think about whatever it is you sent or whatever it is you're about to receive. You know, and you just mull over it as it comes. Not like today. Anyway, go on. Revolution.
Revolution. So that's my new.
Do you have any ideas, or are you reticent about telling people about your crazy theories?
I don't have any crazy theories. I have a theory that it's not the complete story.
But you don't have any like
Because
crazy
here's
theories.
here's the reason for it, right? Like, this is what I was thinking. You have all these people who are kind of either storming the Capitol or talking about like another civil war.
Mhm. Are we talking about today or back then?
In today.
Okay.
You know, when they point to the Second Amendment as this like bulwark, hey, I need to have my guns and my ammo so that I can fight tyranny, you know, and that's why the Second Amendment is there, so that we can fight tyranny. But there are some significant differences between circumstances today and the circumstances of, you know, the 18th century or Civil War era.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the thing is about circumstances. It's not like there's a giant flag somewhere that pops up that says like the circumstances are finally perfect for revolution, right? It's like what are
Yes.
the correct circumstances to?
Well, the first thing is to note, right, that if you're going to say like the founding fathers, you know, place the Second Amendment into the Constitution as a preventative measure, right? As we're going to arm the citizens, right, to prevent against the tyranny of our own government, right? So the idea is that they have planted the seeds of a revolution within the Constitution itself, right? Like they're envisioning at some point that there will be the tyranny of, in our democracy that will necessitate that a well-armed citizenry will rise up and protest. That is a curious notion that I'm not sure you will find, right? It's one thing to say, we rise up against a foreign power or whatever it was, a colonial power. It's another thing where you did not have any rights of representation. You didn't have any rights of petition. You know, right? You were as a colony, you had no civil rights, right? Like England could do what it wanted by nature of you're a colony, and B, it's a monarchy, or well, I guess at least it's a parliamentary monarchy, right? But it's very different than what we have today, where you are allowed to vote, right? Not only in your city or your county or your state
right? But also in the federal elections, right? So for president, for senator, for your representatives. Now, if one were to say that you could not vote, right? Like, could DC or Puerto Rico, I think Puerto Rico can vote though, in the national elections. I believe that is true. I believe so. I could be wrong on that, but I think that's right. If you were to say, like, I have been, like a large swath of the country has been deprived of its right of representation, cannot vote, maybe you might have an argument that is closer to what was happening in, pre-revolutionary America. The Civil War is a whole other, totally different thing, right? I mean, that was not. I mean, basically they were pissed off because Abraham Lincoln got elected, and they were like, all right, we're going to go off on our own, and then we're going to attack all the federal property within our state borders and try to take over those things. And that
worked for a time.
I mean, they kick ass for a little bit, right?
But also, like, that is I guess I shouldn't say that nobody thinks that the South was justified for, seceding, but that is not the most popular opinion. We'll put it that way. I'm sure there are lots of people who think that was a justified war, or rebellion. But it's an interesting kind of comparison to make. Like, yes, I think the South should have rebelled against, the end of slavery, and we're just like them.
Patriots.
But anyway, like, what I want to see is like what were the actual circumstances at the time? Like, what was the list of complaints? And were the colonists at the time actually attempting to rebel and create their own government? Because I suspect that there were a lot of people who were like, we don't want to be set loose. We don't want to have independence. We want to just get some redress for the wrongs that we're suffering, right? And so I don't know the whole ins and outs of those things. We have this idea that the English were insufferable, which I'm sure they were, right? And then we just rebelled because of taxes,
Yeah. I thought one of the things I read was that I think Franklin owned a bunch of, was it Franklin who owned all the printing shops?
I don't know about all of them, but
Not
he did
all
have
of them,
a press in Philadelphia. I
Like, a
believe.
lot. And like he became kind of the dude in charge of like spreading information to people in the area,
Sure.
And
That
I
sounds
think
believable.
the English were trying to control information via like making things taxed with stamps, right?
I don't know.
And I think that was part of the
They
reason.
taxed a lot of stuff. I know that. It's true.
Like they were cutting like really heavy into his business, and also like making it so that
Well,
he wasn't
it's
allowed
very
to print.
clear that the way that my understanding was that the colonial system worked was that you would grow stuff, and you would take these raw materials, and you would ship them to England, and England would process the raw materials and sell it back to you and everybody else in the world, depending on where the markets were. You were not allowed to trade with like the French or the Spanish or the Dutch, as a colonist, as an English colonist, and nor could you make any of this stuff yourself, right? You couldn't start a textile mill, right, to create some clothes for yourself. You had to like send it over to England, have them make it, mark up the prices, send it back to you. I also wonder whether, what was the situation with, the French and the Native Americans, and whether it was security issues, right? Was England protecting people, right, from the incursions of
right after what's the revolution
predatory?
Didn't the British join up with the Native American like group?
Well, the French,
and the French?
there was the French,
They were up
the
north.
French-Indian War,
Yeah.
right? I this is something I kind of have a vague notion of it from like Last of the Mohicans, but other than that,
Yeah. But I think
right?
the British were supporting them. I recently read about the War of 1812. And
That was after the revolution, right?
Yeah.
1812, 1776. But there was a period of time, even before 1776, right, that we had a different government. We had the Articles of Confederation.
And I don't, there was a period of time where we even debated about our place in the world, like, because it's no good to just be these 13 colonies set adrift, and we didn't want to be like have the French come in, or the Spanish and take over, because that was no bueno.
they're not exactly religiously tolerant. At least the English would let you leave, right? You go settle another colony across the world. You know, they wouldn't necessarily burn you at the stake
Shove on good.
like the Spanish might.
I was going French.
French, either one. I mean, nobody was really religiously tolerant, you know, at that point. But
I think the English, at least, and the Dutch would at least let you sail off over yonder.
Are you getting into like the westward expansion almost? Are you going to go into that territory?
No, that's a whole other era of, you know.
I don't know. Well, this is kind of the start because like around the War of 1812, that's when we started like meeting like the Native American Confederacy under Tecumseh. I went to a summer camp as a kid
Yeah.
that was named after Tecumseh.
Yeah.
We learned his name.
Can you spell it?
Tecumseh, I think, Tecumseh. But he was, I guess he led like a party of like 5 nations or a confederacy of 5 nations, and then we killed him, and then stopped all that. So that's what I know from my time growing up in Indiana. So
It must be 100% spot on.
well, it's something like that.
I'm just always interested in, like, there's obviously a lot more, you know, there's been a lot of time, even between, my high school, education or middle school education, and, that's been 30 years now.
Yeah, they filled in a lot of the gaps.
There's a lot of gaps, and, there's a lot more history that's been written.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really taught, I don't think in grade school you're taught essentially propaganda, right? I mean, it's essentially like
Something you
a
can,
sugar-coated,
something you can sing a song about.
Right. Yeah. America's great.
Yeah.
We're the best,
Yeah.
which is true. I'm not debating that. I'm saying that they're not really being 100% honest about how it all went down.
They're not. You shouldn't be 100% honest to a 5-year-old.
Oh, I'm talking about like 15, 20. I mean, the thing is that if you actually told people like all the crazy stuff that happened, you probably wouldn't have as many 17-year-olds ready to like march off and fight. So I wonder if there's definitely a lot of what's the word? It's not socializing. It's
Social
brainwashing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's something along the lines of brainwashing, right? Like you're kind of
That's-
giving a expurgated version of like what actually happened,
Yeah.
and then you're like, oh yay, well, I'm a good
I
citizen.
don't know. I had
Freedom.
really good teachers
Yeah.
in high school at least, and at least 8th grade. And I don't know. I got a glimpse of some of the weird stuff that because I had some teachers who were like really into like exposing the truth about history and kind of giving another alternate perspective. But yeah, there's just like back then. I mean, we had the internet, but like it wasn't like as filled because Wikipedia now is like filled
Yeah.
out pretty much any topic you want. Like right now, I can like read a book, and if I see something I have a question, I can Wikipedia it, and it has a whole story.
Yeah.
And it used to like maybe you could find something like in a book or I don't know, but just compared to the way it used to be, it's just way different now.
It's true.
I feel almost overwhelmed by all
How
of
much
this.
information?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, go Google causes of Vietnam War and see,
Yeah.
you
Oh
know,
my gosh.
see how that goes for you.
Any war really.
It was interesting because there's not that many,
Because people don't read books anymore, so there's not that many. Like there's been, I guess, a deceleration of the number of books. Like if you went back to like the 80s or the 90s, before Amazon or before the internet, and you want to look around for like histories of the war, there'd be a million of them, be a million different things.
Yeah.
And that's all kind of slowed down now, I think. Do people even still write books? I wonder, it must be shrinking. The market must be shrinking.
I don't know anybody outside of academia who writes books anymore.
I mean, there are popular books.
Yeah, of course. But like, I feel like back in the day, if you were growing up in the 70s, you might know a writer, or like someone whose job it is to write.
The thing is like, when I was a kid, and for a long time, the cool thing about books, or not the cool thing, but the thing about books was that
They could be cool.
it was cool, but it wasn't necessarily about books. It was about the terrible special effects of film and TV. There was very few things that could capture your imagination in a book. So like, you what?
What?
Well, like for example, like Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
right? Lord of the Rings was a terrible cartoon. Or it was like The Hobbit.
It's also a terrible video game.
Yes, it was all like video games were terrible, right? The graphics were terrible, the special effects were terrible.
Oh wait, I'm thinking of Zelda. Never mind. All right.
So No, they had a Lord of the Rings game too. I don't know.
I was thinking of something.
But my point is that like when you would read a book, like a science fiction book,
Yeah.
or a fantasy novel,
Yeah.
or kind of like almost anything that had a big explosion in it,
Yeah.
right? If they did a film version, right, like horror, like they did a lot of Stephen King movies
Yeah.
when I was a kid,
Yeah.
because he was like the best-selling author.
Yeah.
So they would try to make his films.
They're always terrible.
Almost always just awful,
Yeah.
right? Like there are a few that are pretty good, like The Shining was good, but that wasn't really heavy special effects.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't super special effects.
The blood in the elevator?
But that's not like
That's-
CGI. That was
that's-
like
that's
that was like
definitely
red
special.
food coloring, right? Like
It's a special effect.
and he was extraordinary, Stanley Kubrick, because he could construct like Space Odyssey 2001. Like he would create these giant sets
Yeah.
that actually. I mean, if you go back and watch like 2001 Space Odyssey, it still holds up. Like it's not like Star Wars. If you go back, if you can even find the old like the original version of Star Wars that were released, like it's terrible. Like you watch it and you're like, only somebody who's never seen a decent special effect would ever think this stuff was any good. And it was mind blowing at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember we had HBO and like HBO would have the specials about like the making of Star Wars,
Mhm.
and it was like, oh, so innovative.
Yeah.
But it was really innovative because they didn't have any money and they had to like be creative, which was awesome. But my point is just that you would read a book because the movies were probably going to be terrible, right? It wasn't like, oh, should I read the book? Or first of all, probably if the special effects in the book that were necessary by the book
Yeah.
were not possible, you wouldn't even have the movie, or you'd have a really terrible version or adaptation of the movie,
Yeah.
of the book in the movie, And then like Stephen King, like those movies were terrible, and the TV
They
shows.
weren't all bad.
And now what I find is that the movies are better than the books,
Yeah.
right? The movies are like, I mean, whatever little like feeble imagination I had has been totally supplanted by, Peter Jackson's much superior version of, the events.
I hate that. I miss being able to read a book and have it be more detailed than what any movie today could have been able to produce. Like that's
The thing is about a book is that it requires your participation as a reader.
not really like.
Well, no, because hear me out, right? Like, you're given no book. Like, if I went back, I've read Lord of the Rings because I'm a total nerd, right? I've read the Lord of the Rings a million times.
Yeah.
Like, that was the book it was like the Bible for me, right? I mean, some people read the Bible all the time. I read the Lord of the Rings. I read the Silmarillion. I read everything I could find, right? If it was Lord of the Rings, I read it.
You should have just started with that, and I would have assumed that you.
That I'm a total dork, right? But the way that Tolkien wrote was not very super detailed. And so that you as the reader, now some books, obviously there's a spectrum. Some authors are very detail oriented and they give you the image.
Yeah.
And other authors, they don't. And so, and it depends on, from genre to genre and author to author, and maybe even, where the author is in their career. Maybe earlier, maybe they leave out some things to the imagination, and later they might be more explicit. But in general, no matter what it is, they describe something. They describe a person, dark hair, clean cut, muscular, angular face, whatever it is, and you have to fill in that blank with your mind. And because unless there's a picture in the book, sometimes they have the pictures in the book, and you kind of be like, this is what the pirate looks like in Robert Louis Stevenson or whatever. But even then, you had to kind of fill in the content of the book. Movies, you don't have to do that. You just sit down and you're like, all right, hit me up.
But no, I feel like I don't read a lot now, but I used to read all the time. It was the only thing that I did for a long time. And at least for me, I would get to a point where I would look at the book and I would be reading it, but I wouldn't be reading it. My eyes would scan the page, and then everything just happens. And
What do you mean?
everyone's
Obviously, you're reading it.
you're reading
Like, I
it,
don't
but you're
understand.
not I'm not putting together the picture. It just happens, right? I'm not trying to create the image that the book is giving me. I'm looking at the book and the image happens. And this is something that I think also
But you
happens.
are creating the image. Your mind is constructing the image.
Am I creating?
Well, you're doing it together with the author. You're not by
But
yourself,
it's,
right?
but it's
It's together.
but it's me and a part of my brain that I'm not in control control of is what's creating that.
But it's your brain.
But it's not like me tinkering. And like this is the same with jiu-jitsu. Like around the time when I got to purple belt, I started getting the feeling like my jiu-jitsu was doing itself like in my body. And it was a very similar experience where like I wasn't like actively, like I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu, like I wasn't trying to do stuff. I was like doing jiu-jitsu, but I was more of like a participation in the experience. And I feel like reading should be the same way, where like you're not reading a book, you're reading a book, but the book is also like reading you to some degree.
Well, I mean, the author is going to, I mean, is working within conventions, whether they're contradicting them or using them or whatever, subverting them. You know, there are certain things that, you know, you work on reader expectation. And a clever novelist, or whatever writer, is going to play on those, on the reader expectations, on audience expectations. You know, that's in every, that's the idea of the twist, you know, the plot twists and things like that. It's like you have a certain expectation and it's foiled or somehow delayed or whatever, you know, and people, either they hate it or they love it.
Yeah.
You know, and sometimes you're mixing and matching things. You know, you're taking fantasy and you're putting it into the, you know, English public school system.
Harry Potter used to be really good at that. Like J.K. Rowling.
Yes.
Like, the mix of like the fantasy and like English history.
Yes.
And then, but also like the way, like every time she would end a chapter, there would be some sort of like twist on the expectations where you're just like.
Game of Thrones is another one that did the same thing with a kid. She kills, or he kills the hero of the hero of the book. And then the whole series. Did you read the books?
No.
I mean, the books are amazing because, you know, you have actual perspective. Like it goes from character to character. So you're seeing the thought processes of each character over time as they discover, and then you're learning about them. So the people that you think are villains in the beginning, they may be villains, but they have a perspective, right? And so that makes them a villain. And then there's all these things where you kind of you think in the beginning because you're given a hero based on their perspective. They're you know what you think of as a hero is filled by a person. But by the time you get to the end, you realize that the reality of the story, if there is one, it's like, well, have you heard of Rashomon? We talked about Squid Game yesterday. Now I'm going to talk about Rashomon. Rashomon is another movie by Kurosawa, who you need to watch. I don't understand it. If you are going to be like a culturally fluent person, you need to watch this film. But it's a film where it shows the same events from different participants' point perspectives.
Yeah.
And so you're given that first kind of image or story or narrative. And so then we generally want to fill in patterns, right, as humans. And so you fill in the pattern with all the genre conventional expectations. But then it shifts to someone else's perspective. And and over time, you get a richer, at least understanding the complexity of the situation. There may not be a good guy or a bad guy, right? They may all be forced to do bad things. They may all be good people at heart, or think they're doing good, or you know what I mean. They might be acting to the best of their ability, to their whatever flawed or perfect moral compass that they possess, based on their circumstances, or their point of view, their history, or the information that they're given. You know, sometimes they might be denied information, so acting on the lap of some other information. So it's just that sort of thing that Game of Thrones did, where you have over time you realize like I've accepted this person's narrative, but they didn't really know what they were, or they were lying to everybody, or they just weren't telling the complete truth. You know what I mean? So
that's something that, I mean, I don't know if you watched the TV, the HBO version. They tried to do some of that stuff, but it's not like a purely visual medium like film. Does not, unless you're Kurosawa and you're clever at doing this, and you spend a lot of time, you know, Game of Thrones is like about solving the mystery of what the hell's going on, who's who. You know, Rashomon is really about perspective. It's about storytelling and about the nature of perception and understanding, and the limits of that any person might have. So I mean, you could do that in 2 hours, right? I mean, but if Game of Thrones want to do it, you have to do it in a book, the way that they did it, because you can't do a first-person perspective. You can do it in video games, but it's not as easy to do it in a film,
Yeah.
right? That's Nobody wants to watch a film, you know, that looks like
First person.
Doom,
Did you
you know.
see that? They made that. It was like Hardcore Henry or something. It
oh,
was
yeah,
a full video in first person.
Yeah.
And it was just like following this guy like in action adventure, like basically Duke Nukem, but
which is awesome. I love Duke Nukem.
It was
Did you
pretty
actually play
good.
the Duke Nukem game?
yeah.
And then,
The original.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's fun. Do you think people are inherently good?
No. Some people might be.
Inherently good?
What do you think makes the
What's good?
difference?
What's good?
I don't know. I'm asking for your perspective.
I think people generally try to be good, according to whatever their, you know, internal compass is.
Isn't that be like inherently good?
No.
I don't know. Like if I try and be good, I think when I say are people inherently good, do you think that most people try to be good?
I think the definition of good depends on, you know, on where you stand.
Where do you stand?
I stand right here, and I feel good doing it. While standing while I still can. You know, like, it's one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right? I mean,
Speaking of Star Wars. Yeah.
you know, that's, you know, that podcast I was telling you about, the Martyr Made podcast about Palestine and the Zionist, you know, pre-Israel. You know, I think he does a pretty good job of kind of laying out that dynamic where both sides think they're trying to do something good
Yeah.
for, you know, and trying to maybe even be tolerant to a certain degree under the circumstances, you know, but they have competing interests, right? You have diametrically, there's one piece of land that we're on. You want to do one thing, and I want to do something else, and there's going to be conflict,
Well, like,
and it's going to get out of hand.
is it like,
It's going to get out of hand, and you can say to yourself, right? Like you can say to yourself, like, I'm doing this for my people, right? I'm doing this for the good of my children, and I'm doing it because of the sacrifices my you know, ancestors made or whatever. But the other side's saying the same thing, right? I mean, I think it's a pretty tough thing to say that. I mean, I think you could say generally that there are certain ways of acting morally within the world that whatever good intention you have should not permit you to do that thing. You know, you can think of a cause that you think like the world would be better if people did not actually get an education. The problem is in the world is that people are too smart. So we're gonna like kill all the people with glasses, right? Or anybody with a college education, or anybody because they've been polluted. Their minds they've been brainwashed by capitalist propaganda. And so these people really, they're suffering, Kevin. They're suffering by that. You know, they don't know what they're doing. They're better off dead. And the world will be better off without them too, because then we'll be able to reestablish a paradise on earth for just the people who don't know any better, who actually have not, their innocence has not been taken from them.
And that justifies killing them?
Well, I mean, in some people's minds, right? Like the ends justify the means, right? Like, so the classic example is if you could go back in time and find Hitler in his crib, Baby Hitler, should you murder Baby Hitler?
No.
Some people would say, hey, look, I'm going to prevent, or at least there's a good chance I'm going to prevent the Holocaust.
You should just give them like an art set.
Should encourage and foster other interests. Really support him and like affirm his.
Give him some watercolors.
Really give him some art lessons and
give him a compliment. That might do something.
I mean, I personally, this is an interesting thought experiment, right? Like, is Hitler really the reason that we had World War II, or was Hitler just kind of the match that struck, the powder that was all the circumstances that led up to World War II? If it hadn't been Hitler, would there have been somebody else?
I don't know. Hitler did a lot of speaking that a lot of other people couldn't have done.
No, but he had an audience, right? Like it wasn't like Hitler came and everybody was just like living in this bucolic paradise and Hitler walked in. I'm not defending Hitler at all, but it wasn't just
like
it's not ever one person who's like, hey guys, listen, I know you have it great, but look, it's their fault, right? Like let's go get them.
The issue is there is this back and forth because like read stuff, and you know, I've been told like when he would speak, he would like start really like quiet and
Yes.
like build his way up,
Yes.
and then
It's good narrative technique.
and he would feed off the crowd's reaction. He would
Yes.
see how they reacted
Sure.
to things,
Yeah.
and then in
He's
either the
A/B
next
testing
speech-
his audience.
Exactly.
Right.
He has to say,
Over time, you know, he's
we I feel like we should still assign responsibility to
Yes.
deciding to continue on with like, you know.
he's probing the kind of the soft spots or the sore spots of his audience. He's a provocateur, right? Like he wants to get people fired up for his own, to basically fuel his own personal ambitions, right? But you know, the tinder, the fuel was there. You know, it was like a question of like, how do I create enough friction to create a spark and set this all on fire, if I can use that metaphor.
Yeah.
I don't know what the right answer is. But I think there is a moral, like you can create a moral system that says, whatever it is that you think good that you're doing by these other acts, which we would normally say are wrong, you're not. It's not actually right.
I don't know. So like, does
But
that?
I mean, again, I'm not saying I have the answer. I'm just saying there is a system that one could imagine. You know.
I mean, utilitarianism is a way to go about things, I guess.
No doubt. No doubt.
But,
It's not the Christian way.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems like it could be used as a way to do really evil.
Of course, that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Like I think, in my experience, there's no greater excuse to do tremendous evil than thinking of yourself as a victim, right?
Or for
Once,
the greater good.
what's that?
Or for the greater good.
Or to think that you were doing something for the greater good, right? Like, hey, sure, you got to break a few omelets or eggs to make an omelet.
But stuff like this happens in jiu-jitsu academies all the time. Not genocide, but like maybe you have a kids class and there's one problem student.
Yes. There's
and
no such thing as a bad student, Kevin. Only bad teachers.
That's true. So you've got one problem student.
Yes.
Well, I do. So no,
Okay.
not really. But in this scenario, yeah, right. Like
All right.
you have the option of putting in the work to make sure that he can experience the behavior changes that you're looking for, and that could, help him and help the group all at the same time. But that's going to take effort, and that's going to take away energy that you can put towards other students. Right. The other option is just kick him out of class.
Well, that's not the only other option.
That's the other basic option.
No, there's other options. Okay, go
Let's play
ahead.
with these options.
All right. I'll
Right,
follow
like-
your hypothetical.
Just getting rid of the kid will be immediately beneficial to the rest of the class,
Yes.
right?
Yes, they're a disruptive kid.
But it is directly.
Or an adult student. I've had adult students. They're
It doesn't matter.
training partners who are just terrible. They're just cancers.
Yeah, we've had issues where people are too aggressive. It was just easier with kids because kids tend to be more.
Maybe they're not hygienic.
in general.
Maybe they have.
So
Maybe they annoy people too much.
as a leader, do you tend to take the utilitarian, like do what's best for the group, or do you tend to focus on the people who need the most help, even if it'll take away from the overall group?
I think it's such a broad spectrum of conduct that we're talking about, right? Like there are kids that are spacey, a little bit, and they're not focused,
You could assume that they're adults too.
or anybody, right? Like, or you could have. I think it's different with kids and adults because kids are not. At least with most adults, you can kind of say to them like, "Here's the deal," right? And they'll at least, as I say this, it's clear to me that I'm not convincing anyone, including myself. Sometimes the adults are just as clueless, if not more, than the kids. But my general perspective is that I don't want to spend. So we have a time, right? We have an hour or whatever of class time, and I have 12 or 20 kids in here or whatever, and I have one kid who is disruptive for whatever reason. Can't focus. Maybe he's aggressive. Maybe he's rude. Maybe he's just whatever. They are kind of an attention like black hole, right? And I have an obligation as the instructor and as the owner to make everyone's experience as positive as possible for that hour. So I personally don't, and I have another perspective on this, which I'll follow up with. I don't want to spend all of my time time and everyone else's time focused on the one kid, right, who's, for whatever reason, it could be innocent, it could be whatever, not their fault, I'm not blaming the kid, but for whatever reason, they need more attention. They need like, dedicated attention, right? And then that means that's attention I can't give to all the other kids who are actually here to learn and are ready to learn. So, I try to play this a couple different ways, right? And again, it depends on the kid. It's not a universal answer. I try to talk to the kid first of all and just say, like, listen, I'm not gonna, you have to be able to pay attention in class. You have to be able to participate in class. Like, there's no point in having someone here who's not capable of participating, right? So for whatever reason, you are not capable of participating in a non-disruptive way, or you just need more attention, then you shouldn't be in the class, right? Now, if you can correct whatever, if there's a correctable behavior, right? Stop slapping people, or stop saying things that are inappropriate, or stop, interrupting things, or stop being whatever it is, like whatever.
Yeah.
Then you can stay. Just stop, right? Like, don't do that, or do that. Do whatever it is.
Yeah.
Do or don't do this thing that you need to do or not do. And if you can, because some kids, okay, here's the rule, right? If you're gonna be disruptive, you can't come to the class. You can come to the little kids class, maybe, or you can come in at another time. Like maybe come to the older kids class. I don't know, because kids are different too. Like there's the 8-year-olds, they have different needs than the 12-year-olds, and that might be different than the 15-year-olds.
Yeah.
Putting a 15-year-old in with the 8-year-old is not conducive to, a cohesive class or a smoothly running class.
Yeah, I found that shaming children doesn't make them work harder.
And what I was going to say about like the follow-up is that I was the kid who was the troublemaker.
Yeah.
As a child, and the more what I needed structure and rules. And when people stopped taking my crap, right, and kind of catering to me, right, then because I would act up to get attention essentially, right, and to make other people's lives miserable.
Yeah.
And I thought that was funny, right, because whatever, I had my own messed up, confused, angry little view of the world, and when people would try to be nice to me or try to like cater to me or put up with, it just fueled it. It was like, oh, I can manipulate this, right? And especially when it was like for jiu-jitsu or something like I'd really like to do, I wouldn't do it because I enjoyed it. But if I didn't like to do it, I would actively try to undermine the class, right? And what really worked for me was like somebody would just be like, okay, this is how it's gonna be. You're either gonna do this or you're not. Or you're going to be here forever, right? Like, because I'll fail you. And then, did I ever tell you that story with my Latin teacher?
No.
At one point, I antagonized the Latin teacher so much in middle school that they took me out of the class.
You had Latin in middle school?
Yeah. I'm old. And I remember I just kind of terrorized this one poor woman who was very nice and lovely. I mean, I regret it. I wish I could go back in time and apologize to her. But I remember at the parent-teacher conference, I could hear her crying in the other room, because they heard, and my mom was there, she was mad. And, I made the teacher cry, and of course I'm like, oh, I own this school. And then they assigned me to Mrs. Bayshore. And Mrs. Bayshore was like 800 years, she was like, first of all, she was like 4'8" or something. She was a tiny little old woman who did not take any shit. Like, and she's just basically like, this is how it's gonna be. If you do what you do, whatever, I forget how, but she was very, didn't mince words. She was like, if you want to keep messing around, that's fine. I'm going to fail you. You don't get another chance. You're going to fail. If you speak out of turn, if you don't turn in your homework, if you disrupt my class, you're going to fail. I'm going to fail you. And you're just going to go, you're not going to come to class anymore. You're just going to go to, this office by yourself. You're not going to go to study hall, because study hall was like, or detention was like fun, like, okay, great. You're going to go to this room. You're just going to be in this room by yourself for the time period of the class. And then you're going to come back next year. You're not going to graduate because you need this class to graduate. You're going to come back next year, and we're going to try again. And you're also going to have one chance in that. And if you fail, we're just going to fail you again.
Yeah.
And essentially it was like, the message to me was different. My mother was basically like, if this happens, you're going to have to find another
after school because we're just not gonna. Your son's not gonna graduate.
Yeah.
You know, for 2-3 years maybe. You know, who knows?
Yeah.
And I remember it was like a cloud that lifted. You know, here was this person who was like, I'm not taking your shit anymore.
Yeah.
This is how it's gonna be. Do you want us to be here forever in this little room, in a like a closet essentially?
I had a closet one.
You know, and that was.
Yeah.
And you know, I could tell she wasn't messing around. You know, like I was like.
I had a very similar experience in 3rd grade. Yeah.
So, you know, I think I was a discipline problem, right? But I wasn't a bad kid. I was just like confused and angry.
Yeah.
And so I needed some rules and some structure, you know, and somebody just tell me, basically lay down the law. I'm not that strict with the kids, but if a kid is hurting other kids, I'm not gonna let them be here, right? If they're constantly interfering with my ability to teach a class and give people their money's worth, right? The parents and the kids, I can't have them in here, you know? And if I tolerate it, then eventually what's gonna happen is everybody else is gonna leave. And I'm gonna be left with this one little troublemaker. And it's gonna be and the thing is too, it's not the kid's fault, it's my fault. It's not the parents' fault, it's my fault.
Yeah.
You know, I'm responsible for this space here. And so this is under my control. I can't control what that kid does when it's outside. I can't control what the parents do when they're not here, you know, whatever. When they're somewhere else, however their relationship is with their family, that's their business. I don't have to interfere. I don't need to even ask a question about it. But when we're in this space, this is mine, right? And I owe it a duty to everybody else here. And you know, this happens with the instructors. You know, I know Aubrey's had issues with, you know, some of the students or the parents sometimes, at least once. And, you know, like, I'm like, I'll back you up, do what you gotta do. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, hey, you just gotta deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, because this person just happens to pay the tuition. No, I mean, you gotta run the class. You know, I don't think you're wrong, you know, I think you're right. Even if it's just a judgment call, I'd be like, I have your back. Because you can't undermine your people. So anyway, that's my thought process on that question. But everyone's different, you know. I don't know. Some people would be like, hey, I'm gonna give that kid private lessons. I think I don't think that's wrong, right? It's just not.
That seems like a solution. Like, do private lessons or something until they're capable of being in the class.
Or, you know, like one of the things I've noticed is that some kids can only handle like half the class.
Yeah.
You know? And I'm like, hey, look, you don't have to. If you get tired, if you get frustrated, if you get angry, whatever it is that's like emotionally is overcoming you or you're not able to control, okay, go sit down. You know, go get a drink of water. You know, go relax for a second, go meditate or whatever. I'm not punishing the kids, right, in that situation. Just like, hey, you need a break, go have a break. Go sit down. Whatever, take a breath. You know, come back when you're ready. And if you're, you know, if you can only do the first 15 minutes, do the warm-up, then do the warm-up. If you just want to come for the sparring, well, we don't let that happen. So there's no just coming for the sparring for the kids.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, hey, do the warm-up, and if you need to take a break, take a break. I'm not, inflexible.
Yeah.
That's also, you also have to look at, like, the structure of the class. And is the structure of the class appropriate for the students in the class, right? Like, so let's say you have 10 6-year-olds in here. Asking them to sit against the wall and watch you do techniques, right? And if you have to say pay attention to the kids, the structure of the class probably needs some work, you know? And sometimes you do, I mean, look, they're middle schoolers, they should be able to pay attention and you're gonna have to tell them that. But if they're like 5 years old and they wanna run around and they're not gonna sit down for long, well, you gotta construct a class where they're running around. And it's kind of like Gandhi at the train station, right? Like, okay, everyone's just sitting around anyway, so, okay, we're all protesting. This is how we protest, right? So if you're gonna all run around anyway, so we're just gonna have a run around class, you know? Hey, good job.
It's called a sit-in.
A sit-in. All right, enough of my whatever I'm doing.
That was a good conversation.
Yeah, I think so. These are keys to life right here.
Can we talk about humility tomorrow?
Humility.
Like, how do
I am the most humilatile person I know.
How do I know if I am humble or if I'm just acting humble? And what's the difference?
Humility.
If someone has opinions about how one
I know more about humility than anyone on earth. I am the most humble person ever.
It's weird because like it goes with our authenticity conversation.
Yes.
Because
I
like
have strong feelings about humility.
I mean I do too. I think I don't know. But it's weird. I don't know how to be both
How to be humble and.
and authentic. Cause I'm the shit.
Oh yeah, well there you go. I mean, be honest. You gotta be true to yourself, right? All right, peeps. See you mañana. Let's go for the outro. I need to get. What do you think? Do you think I should get a new graphic, Kevin? I think I need a new graphic.
I still don't know what it says.
Well, you are the resident Mandarin speaker here. I don't understand.
Sure, but, I don't know.
Why are you here?
Chinese or spoken Chinese?
I don't know
Give
what.
me a
Is there a
reference.
difference?
Yeah, there's a difference.
All right, we'll try to figure this out. Maybe I'll write the developer. I'm sure I can email them.
刚刚的几